welcome back to another Two Sport Bros edition here on the Two Sport Bros YouTube channel and wherever else we decide to maybe upload this in the future. Greg, I have a super new obsession, and that is watching clips of Trevor Bauer.
I know, you keep telling me every day about it, every hour, every minute sometimes. It's insane.
He's so good. Like, he knows what he's talking about. He's sort of like what I was in high school, which was he was a smart kid, but he was also athletic, and he didn't really fit in with everybody else. Like, I hated the jockey kids, but like I was too athletic for like the nerdy kids. I mean, even in grade school, that was like really like that because sixth, seventh, and eighth grade boys always played football, but like I didn't like those kids. But then again, I didn't really like the other kids. But Trevor Bauer is just sort of he's been doing all these like analytics and other stuff since like 2012 2013. He's had all this stuff, and he's just got some great insight on all this amazing information that he's been able to compound and compile. And I'm just like super impressed that he's like super open about it and that he just shows everybody. He breaks down like if he's tipping pitches and other things. He's got a new agent, Rachel Luda, I believe her name is, and the two of them sort of sit in front of a camera and talk about whatever, and you get like up close and personal about like how contracts kind of work a little bit, and I don't know, I just find it super exciting.
Well, he's taking advantage of the layoff to get information on, and for his pitching style, I know he's always been an unorthodox type of pitcher that he beats to his own drum, and to be fair, he did have 2018 where it was all put together and he dominated, although he's more of a high strikeout but moderate ERA type of pitcher. So hopefully he can put it all together, especially since this is technically we're going into his walk year now.
Yeah.
Provided we have a season. But,
Yeah, that was like one of his concerns because he's done with his like initial contract or whatever, and that was one of the things he was asking his agent Rachel about, and they weren't sure. And then actually, like I think the day after they had posted that video, I think MLB had like come out and they sort of said that everyone will be a free agent come the end of the year. So
yeah,
now.
so
My hopes, because I'm starting to dig him now, is he'll go to the Yankees, and then I came across a clip, and apparently Garrett Cole and him hate each other.
of course, it can't be perfect. And granted, remember there was a time a few years ago when Trevor Bauer said he's going to bet on himself and only take 1-year deals.
Yeah,
Not sure if he's changed his stance, especially in the wake of a season-altering issue like this, and with looming labor problems potentially on the horizon.
well, the reason I believe for doing the 1-year deals is he made a bet with a friend, and if he signs a multi-year deal, I think the friend gets to shoot him in the balls with a paintball gun.
He's weird, you know that, Trevor Bauer? I won't take that bet.
He's completely ridiculous. I like him. I think he's funny.
Yeah, but let's get into some of these changes to
Yeah.
the 2020 season. As you know, we have no start date at the moment for anything. I know for the government level that they're hoping that maybe by the end of April they can start to look to easing some restrictions. It would obviously take a lot longer than that for sports to get back up and running. But baseball has come to some agreements with the players' union on what conditions need to be set to start a season up again, and what happens to player contracts in a truncated or outright canceled season. Regarding when a season would start, 3 things would have to take place. Number one is, and most importantly, is that they need to be cleared by medical professionals to be able to do this. That they need to be told it's safe to play. They don't need another Utah Jazz, Oklahoma City Thunder when they're about to play,
No.
and they have to evacuate the stadium again.
Yep.
That was what set all this in motion with sports. They don't want to start again and have this happen all over again. Uh, One of the other big agreements going on that is both the league and the players union do not wish to begin play if fans can't be present, although there is a caveat that at the start of the season uh, they could use neutral sites and empty stadiums as needed. So say for example, considering our area is the hardest hit
Yeah.
in the country by far, that if everywhere else is fine but New York is still in problem, that maybe the Yankees and Mets play their home games in Tampa and Miami until everything cools down, or
Now,
plays in
the
empty
the only
stadiums.
thing with that, Yankees and Mets, that's only two New York teams. But you have the problem though with California, who's hit really hard, and you have all of those teams that are in there, and that's a lot more that you gotta like relocate. And also, I am not a fan of the Yankees playing in. They gotta play in Tampa Bay's home stadium because I do not want that roof over my head.
But it's a second home stadium, or it's one of their multiple home away from home stadiums. So,
Yeah, but that's like every
and
stadium.
and the Rays will actually be able to have a sellout crowd potentially. The
Yeah,
Yankee Red Sox game.
I'd rather play in Baltimore.
Yeah.
That
Well,
way we can
I mean,
guarantee Glaber will hit 3 home runs a game.
yeah, I mean that's also true. But as said, it's still early, and other things you have to think about other alternative stadiums. For example, the Rangers are set to open their next stadium. Maybe they say you got to stay in Globe Life Field in your old park for a while, and we got to use your other stadium as a second home stadium for other teams. So
Yeah,
that,
that's always a thought.
and you have other locations too. Maybe you go to places like Buffalo or Charlotte where there are AAA stadiums that could accommodate a major league team for a time, and say this is your home stadium for a month or something. There are ways they've probably discussed several different contingency plans on what to do for alternate stadiums and such. Although maybe we'll get more of Todd Frazier's thumbs down fans if we have multiple
Maybe.
neutral site games. Another thing they have to consider is travel restrictions, and this is a problem for especially for players who have gone back home to the Dominican Republic, to Japan, to South Korea to train. That they they need to be careful coming back if they can even come back. And that's not to say anything about what to do with the Toronto Blue Jays if there are travel restrictions across the border. So until those restrictions are out, until the medical people say it's safe to play, until there's clear and present easing of restrictions for mass gatherings, sports
Yeah,
as a whole cannot operate.
who would have thought the U.S. Canadian border would be a problem instead of U.S. Mexico? Not to be too
Topical.
political, bros.
Two political bros back in action, coming soon when we run out of sports content.
um, now, now we covered the 3 things, right?
Yes.
So there's that. Now for like basketball, they're still sort of up in the air on that. As for hockey, that's a whole crazy other thing.
Well, hockey's also tied a little to basketball. Mainly, I know they had to shut down because all their arenas were tied extremely closely or were in the same venue as the NBA arenas. So when NBA said we have a serious problem with someone in the game having COVID-19 and we got to shut everything down, and the NHL was forced to do the same because they use the same arenas. If basketball can't play because of a problem with their arenas, but the NHL can't either.
Yeah, but it's a matter of starting back up. The NBA hasn't really like talked too much about it. NHL though, there's been a lot of players split on this stuff. I mean, you have guys like Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby who are like, let's go straight to the playoffs. Then you have the Oilers' Connor McDavid, who's probably the best player in the league. If you don't take him number one in fantasy every year, I don't know what you're doing. But McDavid's saying, no, you got to play a full season. And I think we might have touched upon this, or I was telling my dad about it. But you can't just drop off right now what it is in the NHL. I mean, the New York Rangers are like 2 points out, and they're getting all their players back. So I don't think you can just go ahead and skip right in. I mean, maybe expand the playoffs a little bit, but hockey's a really tough playoff sport.
Well, you have the same thing with that basketball is going to have to go through as well, which is what to do when you start up. Do you go straight to the playoffs, or do you come back?
The NBA is a little bit more different than the NHL. The NHL, you can have a number 6 team come in and win the cup. Does that always happen? No. But the NBA, if you really look at the standings, once you really get past like the 5th seed in really either league, teams aren't really that good and they're not going to win. They might upset like one team, but the odds of number 6 team winning it all in the NBA are slim to none. I think the NBA, if you got to cut the season short or whatever, I wouldn't expand the playoffs for that. There's no need to risk having LeBron James or Jason Tatum get injured in a stupid, meaningless game against a team that's got 20 wins on the season.
Well, you just hit what the problem is. Are the meaningless games actually meaningless right now in a time when everyone is paralyzed with fear, metaphorically speaking, and literally in the fact that a lot of people are out of work? They look to sports as the anchor to show stability. So when everything goes up, I would be for. I know you're for just potentially going back. I would be for continue playing as is, because even those cities that aren't going to make the playoffs, they do need some sense of normalcy returning. They need to see their teams.
What I'm
back.
saying is, if they're going to return and they're going to add extra games, just play the regular season or shorten the regular season. Don't make a bigger playoff bracket where you're making games kind of stupid for what they shouldn't be for the NBA. Because there's no reason, like, if you want to jump back like 6 years when you had what's his name on the he was on the Bulls at the time, Derrick Rose. He was playing against the Sixers and they were up by like 15 points with like 4 minutes to go, and there was like no need for him to be on the court, and he went for like an easy layup or a rebound, whatever it was, and he ended up like doing something to his knee. And he hasn't been the same player since, and they ended up losing as a number 1 Bulls seed to that number 8 seed, and it was just sort of like, all right, that's kind of dumb. So why would you want to have your team that is a number 1, number 2 seed, now you got to go play a team that's won 20 games and they're automatically making the playoffs? That's just, one, that's not right. If you want to play a regular season game to determine who has that number 1, number 2, number 3 seed in the NBA, do that, but don't force them to play a stupid game where you can get hurt in a really bad playoff game.
I see.
Yeah.
I'd
rather them play the regular season games because things can happen and you can see who's going to be a difference in the standings. I think that's different.
Yeah. The only reason you would expand the playoffs in a short term is if the season itself gets truncated.
Yeah.
So
the NHL I think is totally different because, like I said, these teams catch fire like really hot and they can make a good run. I mean, go back 8 years or whatever it was when Jonathan Quick for the Los Angeles Kings, they decided to just not allow any pucks in the back of their nets and win all but like 2 of their games. they sort of ran through the playoffs that year, but that doesn't happen in the NBA. It just doesn't because of how the players sort of group themselves together into their teams.
Right.
So the NHL I would understand a little bit more as like an expanded playoffs if they want to jump right into that because how quick and easy it is to change points there. But the NBA, it's not as fluid.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It probably would have to be something that would be negotiated with the players' union, much like we've seen in baseball, which has the blessing or curse, depending on how you see it, of not having started up yet when they had to shut down. So we see some of the machinations. I know they've already been seriously talking around, speaking of expanded playoffs, that those reports on potentially expanding to a to have that selection show and expanded playoffs in MLB that we talked about a few episodes ago. I think just before everything came crashing down. That they'll act that in a season that's truncated, which I guess we'll talk about that. The reports from MLB are that if their best projection right now and their realistic one is a June startup to run through November. So that's June, July, August, September, October, and into November. So that's 5.5 months of season. There would be multiple, according to these reports, multiple double headers, which is something I'm a fan of.
Totally.
Yeah, and then a potential neutral ground playoffs for some teams, but playoffs going into late November and even into December. So,
I mean,
depending on how it is, if it goes any longer, then you will have no choice but to truncate some games off that because you're already squeezing enough in there. You can only squeeze so many games before you have to start lopping things off.
Yeah, not to loop back to Trevor Bauer, but I was watching the Trevor Bauer clip, and it was him, Sonny Gray, and CC Sabathia. I didn't recognize CC right away. He had a full beard, and he looked like he lost 30, 40 pounds.
I mean, I hope you'd recognize him. It's on his podcast.
I'm just sort of listening to them, and all of them were in agreement. I mean, they're all pitchers, and they all basically said they don't want to have an expanded playoffs and have a number one seed sort of just sit and wait for all these other teams to fight it out, because if your top pitcher's pitching with 3 games to go in the season, and then they're sitting those 3 days, and then you got to wait for a 3-game series to go by, and then a week goes by, and then you got to line this up. So maybe they're not pitching for a week and a half. That throws off their entire rhythm. It throws off hitters. Like baseball, you can't take these long breaks.
No,
it messes so much up. Yeah, and I would not be a fan of that, of making a weird bracket where you leave the top player off. I mean, football, you can do that. Hockey, you can, I guess, kind of get away with it. I mean, teams hit a groove in that, but sometimes you can use a little bit of the rest. But baseball is so specific with getting your rhythm. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of why Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole sort of don't clash, because Bauer's got this sort of a noodle thing that he uses to warm up his arms instead of doing all this heavy lifting and whatnot.
It's new school versus old school.
Yeah, so he's trying to stay loose. He's not building up his arm like Aroldis Chapman just did.
Yeah,
that is one big arm.
Yeah.
And you got to stay loose that way and keep your groove going. And sure, you can throw bullpen sessions and live batting practice, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and remember these. Even this expanded format would bring a wild card round that's a 3-game series, so it'd be longer than what we currently have.
Yeah, and all 3 of them were in agreement again, and they're like, why would you pick who your opponent is? If you're picking who you want, you're really upsetting another team thinking that they're the worst out of everybody there. And you're going to go out there, and now you're going to win in their stadium and try and prove a point and be like, well, you shouldn't have picked us because now you're out of the playoffs.
Well,
And
that's why I've been saying it should be something similar uh, to NBA and stuff. Send 8 team, have 4 team division or 4 divisions in each league. Send the 4 division winners and then the next 4 best teams, and have each division winner face a wild card team in the first round, reverse in the usual best against worst and so on order. And
see,
have
I'm still not. I still like how baseball doesn't have as many teams make the playoffs. Mostly because I guess it sort of falls into the NBA sort of thing, where there's just not too many good teams once you like clear the top. Um,
aside from that one year when there were 300 game winners out of the NL Central.
yeah. Other than that, um, but a lot of times you're getting teams that only win like 82 games on the year, and well, that's over 500, and it had you just won another series and a half worth of games, you'd be sitting on like 87, 88 wins, and that's a pretty decent year. Um, but once you get like below that 80 win mark, it's just not really worth having that team, and it's kind of annoying to me
Yeah,
uh,
well, it
and disrespectful,
yeah,
honestly.
but you do have a problem with teams not investing because they don't see a clear and present shot, and in a situation where a season might you lose games, owners are very hesitant to lose those home games.
Mm.
So one way to recoup them back is get some of the even more lucrative playoff games. Now, for example, if we were to take the current proposal by MLB, since my proposal would have a complete reshuffling and can't really be determined under current divisions, but with the current proposal in play, which is to send an extra, I believe it's an extra 2 teams,
I
wild
think
card
so.
teams. Yeah, so in addition to everyone who was in the playoffs for the American League, that was Yankees, Rays, Twins, Astros, and Athletics, you would also send the Indians, who won 93 games and just missed out,
Mm-hmm.
and you would send the Red Sox, who
Yeah.
were gonna. And think of it this way: if the Red Sox were in the playoffs, maybe do they go further? Do they not trade Mookie Betts? Do they? It brings up stuff like that. Over in the National League, your playoff teams were the Braves, the Wild Card and World Series winning Nationals, Cardinals, Brewers, and Dodgers. Your additional 2 teams would be the Mets, who had 86 wins, the Diamondbacks, who had 85 wins, and then just sitting one game out were the Cubs. And think of it this way: if they knew that there was a chance that they could have got in, do the Cubs do a little more at the deadline? Do they push a little further? Does Joe Madden come back as manager for the team with
Yeah.
a playoff run? So that's what it really brings out. It brings out teams try a little harder to get in for the to get into that glory, into those lucrative and attention drawing things. Like you had the Diamondbacks, who the last 2 years have several years have been just on the peripheral and just missed out. The getting that extra playoff spot could be the difference once again for them, for being 1 or 2 games out or being in on the dance, and potentially, as we saw with the Nationals, potentially going all the way.
Now, my question to you though is, would you rather be that team that wins 85 games a year, uh, and maybe win over the course of 10 years 2 playoff games, or 2 playoff series? Uh, or would you rather be that team that puts it all in, all their chips in, and then you win it all like one year out of those 10, but you miss the playoffs like 4 of those years?
Well, I'm
Do you
in.
want that consistency, sort of like how the Twins haven't won anything in like a decade? I mean, they have missed a few years, but like they've still been overall pretty decent, except that like 2 year stretch that they had. Um, or would you rather have like a team like maybe the Rockies, where they go kind of far, or like the Mets, and you sort of like they make it and then they don't. They make it, they don't.
Well, you'd rather have the consistency because look at what happened with the 2015 World Series. That was between the Mets and the Royals, and see how packed in those years their Kauffman Stadium and Citi Field were. And now look at them last year, where the Mets were kind of bumbling around, and they were like half full, and Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City is absolutely empty. And then look at a team like the Twins, who, yes, they've been bumped out of the playoffs every time against the Yankees, but aside from that stretch between 2011 and 2016 where they were faltering down, that they've been a very consistent playoff force over the last 20 years. That which is great for a team that was on the brink of contraction at the start of the millennium. But that those playoff games bring you fans that even though you know you're going to lose to the Yankees every time, forgive me, anyone from the Minneapolis St. Paul region who watches us, all one of you, but you're still in the playoffs. You're still in the postseason. Being in the postseason means that fans are interested in you. Free agents are interested in you wanting to gun for the postseason and that elusive World Series trophy, or for the NBA, or for whatever commissioner's trophy for other leagues. That the more postseason games you're in, the more you invest in the team to actually be better. Conversely, the less playoff uh, games that you have available, the less likely you are to invest and push into it the whole way. That kind of what I looks like the NL East and Central are right now. That the East you have four teams, maybe three if you count the Mets out with Noah Syndergaard's injury, but three to four teams that could contend. The Central you have everyone but the Pirates, and that could theoretically contend based on what their roster construction is. So, and that's same for several different divisions right now. So the more chances you have, the more likely those teams are going to succeed, and the less likely you're going to have a Miami Marlins or a Pittsburgh Pirates situation where they're stuck in eternal limbo or eternal rebuild.
I guess sort of like I understand you definitely want to have your team in there. That's why for hockey for a couple of years I was like, let's. I hope the Red Wings make the playoffs because they had like a 22-year streak going on where they had made the playoffs. And it was like, let the streak keep going. I didn't care if they lost in the first round or not, but we wanted that streak to continue. But I guess in baseball it's been like so prominent to sort of tank, get some draft picks or trade off some of your pieces, and then grow in some young talent, and sort of like start from scratch. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right. But it's
But
something that's a problem in the league right now.
yeah, and that's something you don't do if you're making the playoffs every year and losing in that first round.
Exactly.
You're not gonna really get any better, but you're not gonna get really any worse.
Yeah. And
And that's sort of the problem.
yeah. And I guess as we come up to the end of our show, that's when I want to leave this segment on. That for all the flack that you give the Dodgers of spending all this money and not winning a World Series trophy, maybe because they were cheated out of it, maybe because they really weren't the better team at the time. For all the talk of the Buffalo Bills back in the '90s losing all those Super Bowls,
Four straight.
yep, they were still there. They were still having a chance to win. That's more that can be said about teams like the Marlins, like the Reds and the Pirates, and other teams that maybe get in one or two times, but don't bother trying. It's because those teams that did get in tried to get in because they had a chance and they took that chance. So the more teams that think they have a chance, the healthier overall a sport will be, especially as you keep expanding and inevitably expand further on in the near future. But for us, our near future says it's the time to end. So
Yep. And I
yeah,
just want to leave it on this one last note. Uh, if baseball needs to make some room for the games, I know we have the double headers, but they should cut interleague play. That should be the first step.
I
I
will
think
fight you on that. I will
I,
fight you
I,
on
I don't want to
that.
play the Mets. It's boring. And I don't want to play the Pirates. I mean, the Pirates will be easy wins, but uh, I think you got to cut interleague play at that point.
I want to see Kristen Yelich pitch again. Pitch.
Yep.
Dear Lord, this self isolation. I want to see Christian Yelich go toe to toe against Shohei Ohtani and Garrett Cole in the American League. I want to see those. I want to see the dynamic. I also want to go. I also like going to stadiums and seeing players I don't normally see because they're in a different league.
Nope,
But
I don't care.
that's just me. But,
I'm just saying, just for this year, if they got to cut games, cut interleague play first, or shorten some of the divisional game series because
yeah,
there's way too many of those. So those are the two options to go along with the double headers.
yeah.
But
We'll
I guess
see.
leave your thoughts and concerns in the comments section below.
Yeah. We'll see you next time. Wash your hands.
Extra well.